Did you know that your electricity bill could soon skyrocket because of a trade war? You probably didn't even know was happening. That's right, Ontario just hit the US with a massive 25% surcharge on energy exports, and the impact could be huge for millions of American households. With tensions between the US and Canada escalating, energy prices are on the rise. If you live in places like Minnesota, New York, or Michigan, you might see your electricity bills go up by $100 or more every month. But why is this happening? And what can we expect next? In today's video, we're diving into how this shocking move by Ontario could reshape North American energy markets, impact your wallet, and what it means for both US and Canadian consumers. We'll break it down with the latest stats, insider insights, and what's really at stake for your future energy costs. Stay tuned to find out how this trade war could affect your daily life. And make sure to subscribe to stay updated on the latest in global economics and energy news. In early March, the political landscape between Canada and the United States saw a dramatic shift, one that could reverberate across global energy markets. Ontario, the Canadian province, imposed a bold 25% surcharge on electricity exported to the US, following a series of retaliatory tariffs imposed by former President Donald Trump on Canadian aluminum and steel. This move has sparked a new chapter in the North American trade war, with consequences that are likely to impact not only businesses but also everyday consumers. This move by Ontario is more than just a political statement. It's an economic maneuver that has the potential to shake up energy markets in both countries. But why did Ontario choose electricity as its weapon in this ongoing trade conflict? Electricity, a fundamental part of modern life, often operates quietly in the background of political discussions. However, in this case, it has become a key player in Canada's retaliation. Ontario supplies a significant amount of electricity to the United States, especially to regions like Minnesota, New York, and Michigan. According to Statistics Canada, Ontario exported 15.6 terawatt-hours (TWh) of electricity to the US. In 2021, which accounted for approximately 8% of total electricity consumption in the northeastern US. By imposing this surcharge, Ontario is sending a clear message to Washington about its willingness to take firm action in response to trade tariffs that many in Canada consider unfair. But why target electricity? The answer lies in the region's unique energy resources. Ontario has access to a diverse energy mix, including hydroelectric power, which gives the province a certain leverage over US energy imports. By imposing this 25% surcharge, Ontario can create a substantial financial burden for US consumers while simultaneously raising significant revenue to offset costs for local taxpayers back home. The real-world implications? Higher energy bills for millions of American households. In regions such as Minnesota and New York, where homes are heavily reliant on energy imports from Canada, this tariff could cause monthly bills to increase by $100 or more, putting additional strain on households that are already grappling with economic uncertainties. While the political and economic implications are significant, the impact on everyday life in the US could be profound. For many American consumers, electricity is already one of the top monthly expenses. In areas that rely on Canadian power, like Minnesota, New York, and Michigan, the surcharge will drive up costs, potentially forcing people to make tough financial choices between utilities and other essentials like healthcare or groceries. Let's break this down with a real-life example. In Minnesota, Michigan, and New York, approximately 1.5 million homes receive electricity from Ontario. If the surcharge were applied uniformly, each household could see an extra $100 added to their monthly bills. For households already living paycheck to paycheck, this could mean a tough financial adjustment. In New York, which also imports significant energy from Ontario, the additional charges could result in significant increases in monthly utility bills, especially during high-demand months, such as winter and summer. According to numerous reports, New York State imports around 20% of its electricity, and about 30% of that comes from Canada, mainly from Ontario and Quebec. This additional financial burden on consumers, when combined with already high living costs, could lead to greater dissatisfaction and political unrest among U.S. citizens. The response from the United States was swift and sharp. President Trump's administration quickly condemned Ontario's move, with Trump calling Canada a tariff abuser and suggesting that the U.S. no longer needs to subsidize Canada's resources. Trump further claimed that the U.S. would no longer be held responsible for Canadian economic vulnerabilities and warned that the U.S. would retaliate by escalating tariffs on Canadian goods even further. This exchange is part of a broader strategy by the U.S. under Trump's administration to renegotiate trade agreements and impose tariffs on countries that are seen as undermining American economic interests. However, while Trump's rhetoric suggests that Canada's actions could be seen as a provocation, many Canadians feel that they are merely responding to unfair trade practices. Ontario Premier Doug Ford has been vocal in defending the province's decision. He has pointed out that the trade war was initiated by the U.S., with Trump's tariffs being the primary cause. Ford emphasized that Ontario's surcharge was not meant to harm American consumers, but rather to apply pressure on the U.S. government to reconsider its economic stance. In his words, "I feel terrible for the American people who didn't start this trade war. It's one person who is responsible. It's President Trump." Beyond the immediate impact on consumers, the Ontario surcharge could have broader implications for the North American energy grid. The interconnected nature of the U.S. and Canada's electricity systems means that any significant disruption in energy trade could cause widespread reliability issues across both countries. Michigan, for example, is particularly vulnerable due to its reliance on Canadian electricity imports for grid stability. In response to the surcharge, Michigan officials expressed concern about the reliability of their power grid, particularly during times of high demand. The disruption of cross-border electricity trade could make both countries more susceptible to grid-scale disruptions, potentially leading to widespread blackouts or other energy shortages. According to the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, NERC, the U.S. Canada electricity grid is the largest interconnected grid in the world. Any disruption in this energy exchange could affect millions of people, with some reports estimating that up to 33 terawatt-hours. TWH of electricity used in the northeastern U.S. is sourced from Canada, particularly Ontario and Quebec. New York has also raised alarms, ordering a review of how much the surcharge would increase electricity costs for state residents. Governor Kathy Hochul pointed out that Trump's tariffs had already destabilized capital markets, and Ontario's move would only exacerbate the situation. For New York families and businesses, the consequences of these tariff-driven uncertainties could be disastrous. With Canada's response to U.S. tariffs heating up, the political leadership in Canada is also undergoing a major shift. Former Bank of Canada Governor Mark Carney is set to take over as Canada's new Prime Minister, replacing Justin Trudeau in a leadership change that will dramatically shape the country's response to the ongoing trade war. Carney's leadership comes at a critical time. As Prime Minister, he will have to navigate the escalating trade tensions while balancing domestic political interests and energy policies. Carney has previously positioned himself as a seasoned crisis manager, with experience in both the Canadian and UK central banks. His approach to economic leadership will play a pivotal role in determining how Canada responds to the continued challenges from the United States. Carney has already made it clear that he will maintain retaliatory tariffs on U.S. goods until Canada receives a credible commitment from the U.S. to engage in fair trade. He also outlined plans to strengthen Canada's energy independence, with a vision of turning the country into an energy superpower by focusing on domestic energy production and new trade corridors with trusted partners. Carney's economic strategy is ambitious, focusing on building Canada's global competitiveness through a series of bold steps. One of his key priorities is to find new markets for Canadian exports, reducing reliance on the United States and seeking more balanced trading relationships with countries around the world. Additionally, Carney plans to invest heavily in infrastructure, using the federal government's financial resources to fuel productivity and innovation. Carney has already made clear that he will expand Canada's trade network with a focus on the Asia-Pacific region and Europe. According to the World Bank, Canada's exports to Asia accounted for 27% of its total exports in 2021, and Carney aims to boost this figure to 40% by 2025. However, Carney's vision is not without its challenges. Canada faces an uneven political landscape, with the Liberal Party holding less than half of the seats in Parliament. This could lead to a snap election, further complicating the political environment during an already tense trade war with the US. Despite these hurdles, Carney has pledged that his government will not shy away from making the radical changes necessary to ensure Canada's economic strength in the face of mounting global uncertainties. Whether it's by reducing domestic trade barriers or investing in new energy projects, Carney has a clear message. Canada must take bold steps to ensure its economic future, regardless of what happens with the US. With a new leadership shift in Canada and ongoing trade volatility, the coming months will be crucial in determining the future of US-Canada relations. Can Mark Carney's leadership steer Canada through this trade crisis? Will the US back down, or will tensions continue to escalate? What we do know is that these tensions will reshape the economic landscape, and the consequences will be felt by ordinary citizens on both sides of the border. Stay tuned as we continue to monitor these developments closely. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more updates on this and other global economic stories. The tension between the US and Canada has reached a boiling point, and it's about to reshape the future of both nations. What was once a close economic partnership is now threatened by tariffs, trade barriers, and escalating political rhetoric. This isn't just a battle over trade deals. It's a clash of national interests, with each side digging in their heels. And the consequences are already starting to hit home. In 2025, the US and Canada find themselves at the epicenter of an escalating trade war that's unraveling decades of economic cooperation. What began with President Trump's tariffs on Canadian goods has quickly evolved into a larger confrontation, targeting everything from oil exports to the vital trade route through Canada to Alaska. The stakes couldn't be higher. Both nations are now locked in a battle over national pride, economic stability, and political influence. As tensions rise, both countries are taking measures that threaten to affect their everyday citizens, creating uncertainty, higher costs, and strained diplomatic relations. This video explores how the growing rift between the US and Canada is shaping the present and future for millions of people, and why this trade war could change the landscape of North America forever. The conflict started when President Donald Trump imposed a 25% tariff on Canadian goods in 2025, a decision driven by the US administration's broader economic strategy to address perceived trade imbalances. Trump's administration argued that Canadian trade practices, particularly in sectors like steel, aluminum, and dairy, were unfair to American industries. This marked the beginning of a series of retaliatory tariffs and countermeasures. For instance, the US dairy industry faced serious disruption with the imposition of Canadian tariffs. Dairy products like milk and cheese, traditionally sourced from the US, for Canadian supermarkets, saw significant price hikes. By mid-2025, milk prices in the US are projected to rise by 5 to 7% due to Canadian retaliatory tariffs. This cost increase has directly impacted US households, pushing grocery bills higher. Similarly, the tariffs on US steel and aluminum exports to Canada saw a 15% increase in production costs for manufacturers across the US, affecting everyday consumer products such as bicycles, appliances, and automobiles. For American consumers, this meant higher prices for durable goods. These initial moves set the stage for further escalation as Canada, under the leadership of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, retaliated by implementing surcharges on electricity exports to several US states. This action, affecting states like Michigan and New York, has seen approximately 1.5 million households in the US facing rising energy bills. In essence, what began as a conflict over steel and aluminum quickly expanded to sectors that directly impacted everyday life: dairy prices, the cost of energy, and consumer goods. Alaska, being geographically separated from the mainland US, is critically dependent on Canadian land routes for access to the rest of the country. The transportation of goods to and from Alaska largely occurs through Canada, making this trade route indispensable for US industries that rely on Alaskan resources like oil, seafood, and minerals. Approximately 4,000 trucks per day travel through Canada to supply goods to Alaska, and many of these trucks carry goods essential to U.S. markets. At the heart of the trade